Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Giant Pod with me, Andy Wrintmore. This week we are talking to Chris Bucklow, who is an artist, a visual artist, an author of a book full of dreams that he's been recording for 30 years. We get into a really deep dive chat about dreams, what they mean, and specifically what they mean to the individual. And in this case, it's Chris Bucklow. It's a wild ride. This is exactly why we started this podcast. I absolutely loved doing this one. So here it is. So, how you doing, Chris? You all right?
I'm good, Andy. Thank you.
What have you been up to today?
Cutting the hedge.
Cutting the hedge, buying bikes.
Yeah, buying bikes.
We just previously spoke to Tom McEwen, who says to ask you about the Groucho Club and days of old.
It's it's a good place. It's not somewhere I hang out very often, but when I'm in London, as they offered me life membership for free, well, not for free, but for old rope for one of my pictures.
Yeah,
I have got a membership, so it's a nice place to go and drink or stay. In fact, it's a nice place to stay.
Okay, what is the Groucho Club? Because he's talked about it like it's this sort of center of sort of in the 90s, it was center of sort of party town and hedonism and stuff, but like kind of what is it? So I brought up Groucho Marx, but I don't really know who that is either.
It's just a West End club, and I guess it's for media types, really. You know, so you see TV people in there, and nobody is supposed to recognize anybody, so you know.
Oh, okay, right. So it's one of these sort of after hours. If you're cool, you come in. If you're not, they know not to let you in.
Yeah, you're not supposed. You know, you see somebody famous in the corridor, and you're not supposed to go, "Oh, I'm a real fan of your work," kind of
right.
thing, you know.
And you're not supposed to tell anyone you saw them.
No, probably not. But like I say, you know, we hardly ever go, so it's. It's not something that I know a great deal about.
Okay. So places like that do intrigue me. This is the secretive nature of it, and you think, how do I get in? Do you know what I mean? I always feel like there's something is being kept from you, and that's a great appeal.
You can come in as a guest.
Oh, can you? Okay, so you don't have to.
Next time we're in London together, Andy.
Right. Yes. Tom said I'll take you to Groucho's, so maybe we can. We can do this together.
I'm a freebie, you know, though. I tend to stay here.
Right.
If I possibly can.
Okay. Are you sort of sick of London?
No, but I decided I wanted to concentrate.
Right.
And there are too many temptations in London. You know, too many films you might want to go and see. Too many art shows for me, because I'm interested in art. So when we moved to Frome, I was ready to just put my blinkers on, and just get on with my work, really.
So let's talk about your work. How would you describe your work? Because clearly you're an author, which we'll get onto shortly. But you principally you are an artist, aren't you?
I am an artist, although I'm never quite comfortable with the word for some reason.
Okay.
So, you know, I often sit around thinking, like when I was cutting the hedge today, I might have gone into a phase of thinking, now, if somebody asked me what I was, what I am, you know, what am I going to say? So often I think of alternative titles, like in a funny way, I'm a kind of biographer. Sometimes I'm an autobiographer because my work tends to be about what's going on inside me. And sometimes because I'm fascinated in what's going on inside other people, when I write, very often it's about other artists, or preferably dead artists who can't answer back.
You can't fact check.
Yeah. And so I do like a biography type thing. You know, I look at the evidence of their work, what's going on in the work, and I look at their letters and any data I can glean to kind of get some clues as to what motivated them. I'm interested in what motivates people.
Same here, very much so.
Yeah.
I'm so interested in what makes people do the things they do, and what experiences in their lives have led them to have these particular personality traits, or have these self-destructive patterns of behavior, or interested in the things they're interested in, or why they must be a contrarian, or or why they never disagree with anyone. And I just find people to be so fascinating, and that's really cool. So do you kind of do that? Do you kind of like are you sort of like a forensic psychologist in a way when you go through your research for a particular artist? Are you looking for that sort of Sherlock Holmes kind of, you'll perceive, details of their life through the way that their, a picture of their office or something is laid out?
Inevitably, it's sort of informed by my own experience. So, when you're trying to understand somebody, the only template you've got to lay on them to see how they are similar or different is your own nature.
Right.
So the experiences that I've had through making my work over the last, 40 years or so, and it's evolved the way that I've approached my work, and my understanding of what I did evolves as well. You think you're doing one thing at the time, and then later on you kind of get this intuition that it was actually about something else. So those kind of experiences in the studio and out of the studio when you're meditating, for want of a better word, about what it is you do and you've done, that informs how I think about other people's work. So I've got a kind of I've got a kind of set of suspicions about what gets people out of bed in the morning.
Right.
And then I go looking around to see if that, let's call it a hypothesis, can be proved or disproved. I'm not never out to, I want to find out what's really going on. But you end up having that bouncing around between theories that you have about them, and when it gets disproved, then you throw it out and find another one.
So who have you done, I guess, as autobiographical work for then?
So I've done, most recently, I've done Francis Bacon.
Tell me about Francis Bacon.
So Francis Bacon is an artist, a painter, very well-known painter. He's as well-known, I guess, for his kind of hedonistic lifestyle, as he is for his, people call them shocking images of people who are, he paints portraits mainly, and the people are dissected in a certain way.
Right.
So, but it's, he never understood why people were shocked by the images, because basically it's, Picasso in his Cubist period, where everything's turned into straight lines, verticals and horizontals. Bacon's only really done that, where in Picasso the body looks kind of dematerialized because it's turned into these kind of geometric forms. Bacon only does that with curved lines, so that it looks biological, looks biomorphic. But there's something about seeing a body dissected in straight lines, which the Picasso analytical cubism does, which doesn't make you feel, there was blood involved in this.
Right.
Whereas when you see a Bacon, it looks like somebody's been at them with a machete.
Wow.
And He's an interesting character.
I'm definitely going to be looking at him up later. So you've done Bacon, and who else have you done?
I've done an American painter called Philip Guston. And Guston was one of the abstract expressionists. So he was a big pal of Pollock and Rothko and de Kooning and people like that. And he's another... What I was interested in with Bacon is there's a mystery as to why the hell he's working in the way he does.
Right.
Guston's a mystery too because he developed a very personal language of symbols.
Okay.
A very highly developed one. Just at the end of his life, in the last 10 years, after he
help me out with that because I'm trying to visualize what that looks like.
So, for instance, you might have a mouth, a disembodied mouth, spewing out legs, hundreds and hundreds of legs, but legs, long legs, short legs, all kind of like a waterfall out of this mouth.
Mm. And
the mouth's locomotion is actually this torrent of legs. They're actually walking. So it's as if this disembodied mouth is like a cartoon character that's walking through, some sort of Mutt and Jeff cartoon or something.
Right. So it's fairly psychedelic. Or does this predate what would be considered to be psychedelic?
It's 1970s.
So psychedelic.
So
bang in the psychedelic.
You wouldn't call it psychedelic in terms of its appearance. Way. They look very blunt.
Right.
Then the colours are reds and blacks, and they're not psychedelic in those lovely kind of Jimi Hendrix,
right.
San Francisco poster, kind of things. They're pretty brutal looking things.
So why are you drawn towards the darker art, I guess?
Yeah, I was just thinking...
Not the dark arts, but the the darker arts.
I was just thinking, oh my God, this is going to look as if I'm interested in the darker arts, yeah.
Who's your favourite artist? Ed Gein.
Yeah. To be honest, I think it probably is coincidental that they seem quite dark. It's the fact that they've developed an iconography, so a symbolic language, a lexicon of symbols that is very highly developed, like a hieroglyphic.
Right.
Okay, like the hieroglyphic
or emojis
language.
For the millennials.
Exactly. And you get a sense when you read anything about them that nobody knows what the hell they're on about. Okay, people have been studying Bacon for a long time, but really nobody's got to grips with his kind of hieroglyphics, as it were. Even more so with Guston, because they're much more in-your-face, developed visual signs like hieroglyphs. It's just frustrating when you read a book about him. You think this guy hasn't got any idea what is going on. Let's have a go at cracking the code. That's what it is. I'm into cracking codes.
And is there a code?
There is a code.
And he said this himself, is he? That there's something to find in this art. There's a message here.
No.
Or are you just speculating?
No. The great thing, Andy, is that these guys are like mediums. Okay?
Right.
So they do not know what is coming out of their mouths, into their work. So when you read Guston's late letters, you can sense that although he doesn't know, he's got this feeling that something's emerging, and he gets exceedingly excited about 4:00 in the morning when he's finishing a painting. He starts to shake because it's showing him stuff about his unconscious mind that he hasn't got access to when he's awake.
Oh my God. That's exciting. I like this.
That is good. It's fascinating.
So where do you get your start? Where do you begin and how do you end up, being a biographer for these batshit crazy artist?
How do you get your start?
Yeah.
My start.
Where's the beginning of when you're like, okay, I think I'm going to be an artist. I think this is.
Yeah. Well, it was weird for me because I wasn't an artist until I was in my 30s.
Oh.
So up until I was 32, I was an art historian. Okay, so writing books about a dead artist was what I did for a living, basically. So right after I graduated in art history, I went to work in London in a museum called the V&A, the Victor and Albert Museum. And so for 15 or more years, I was a straight up museum curator come art historian. And during that period, I suppose the process was, because in those days, certainly in a national museum like that, you are more or less left to your own devices. So I could choose the things that I studied. I could choose the exhibitions that I put on. I could choose the stuff that I was asked to write about, So
you could play to your strengths.
So you play to your strengths, but you also play to your inner unknown obsessions.
Right.
All right. So I did that for all these years, all throughout my 20s. And I think what must have happened was what was building up inside was that I was unconsciously asking questions about the world vicariously and answering them vicariously through writing about history. So you'd ask a question about your life wrapped up in a question about the world and history. And eventually it dawned on me what I was doing. So I wasn't really only writing art history. I won't deny that there is an art historical element to them. But if you were party to some of my internal obsessions, you'd find that there was a subtext underneath, and even underneath that, layers down below what was actually going on in the writing or in the exhibition or whatever. There was something that I, Chris Bucklow, really needed to know about the world, and that I was asking and answering through the act of doing the art historical exercise. And when I woke up to that, I thought,
What was the moment when you were like, oh, I know what's going on here? Was there some sort of epiphany, penny drop?
Well, there was just a depressing misunderstanding of it at one point where I thought, actually, I've just written a piece about a modern artist. And then I'm noticing that I said the same things about somebody who died in 1850. I was interested in their human nature, whether they were contemporary or 18th century or 19th century or whatever. And for a moment, I thought, oh, crikey, I'm all washed up. I'm dredging the barrel of new things to say. And then it struck me, no. These things are your obsessions. And this tells you a lot about who you are, Chris. And wouldn't it be more honest to do something artistic with this and answer them, ask the questions and answer the questions overtly and directly? And so it was a moot point. Am I going to be a writer, a novelist or something, or I don't know, you could, a sculptor or whatever, and as it turned out, I did become an artist, visual artist, and I've ended up being a painter, really. So that's how it happened, and that's you asked about the how do you get this into being a kind of biographer, a psychobiographer? Is that what you asked?
Well, yeah. It was sort of like it's sort of psychoanalytical to a degree, isn't it? When there's like a serial killer on the loose, and they sort of create a profile based off of the actions of this person, or the way that they kill people, or the places they're doing it in, or the fashion they do things.
Yeah.
They begin to create some sort of idea of who they're hunting for, even though they have no idea who the individual is.
Yeah.
They can use these things, which are signposts for other personality traits or psychiatric elements, and they figure out, okay, we're looking for a white male in his 30s, probably lives with his mother, could be from a high place in society, blah blah blah, and they tend to, and then there's a lot of the time when they get these guys historically, and they're kind of in the ballpark. And you think, that is incredible. So are you kind of doing that with art, of what they have left behind for you?
Yeah, and I guess we as humans are very interested in getting inside the heads of other human beings, because we're kind of locked in here.
Yeah, we're a computer and a meat puppet.
Yeah. Bacon said something interesting about this. He said, sex was never satisfying enough for him because he couldn't get fully inside the nature of his partner, and that the sex act was just an effort to commune with that person.
So he wants to intertwine on a much deeper level.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah,
it's not a physical act for him. Then it's something much more spiritual.
Yeah.
And where do you think that need comes from? Do you think he's going to find what's missing in himself within his partner?
I don't know. Are we just curious about?
Maybe he'll get why they like him. Maybe he's looking for a mirror within them.
Yeah, or maybe it's just lonely being locked in your psyche.
Perhaps you want to see if it's so terrible being you. Are they suffering too? Is it the human condition, Chris?
Do you know what, Andy? I used to see him on a regular basis in South Kensington in the 1980s. So I was working at the V&A, and I would get out of South Kent Tube, and very often a number 49 bus would pull up, and we coming out of the tube on the pavement were like a massive wall of people. And as the bus came to a halt, he would jump off the kind of running plate at the back into the crowd. It was the only way to get off the bus and through the arcade. And sometimes he would bump into me. I mean, literally shoulder charge me to get off. I recognized him, but I had no interest in him whatsoever. I didn't like his art. I just thought, oh, there's that Francis Bacon guy.
So you didn't even have a conversation with him?
No, I could have run after him and said, oh, Mr. Bacon, tell me about, whatever. I had no interest in it.
But now you're fascinated by him.
What a missed opportunity, Andy.
Do you feel maybe your fascination for his art has been strengthened by the fact that you have actually had interactions with him?
I don't think so, Ray. No, it came out of the work, but it seeing the paintings, but it did seem ironic that there had been all these opportunities, sometimes 3 times a week for 10 years.
What did you learn about him from your short observations of him? Does that inform your writing, or have you got to absolutely disregard that?
Not really. Because you see, because he was interviewed so much, there was a critic called David Sylvester who was very studious and very interested in Bacon, and he did a whole series, maybe 6, 8, 9, I don't know, of lengthy interviews with him on the radio, on the telly, just privately recorded, and they've been transcribed and put out in a book, Interviews with Francis Bacon. And Melvin Bragg did a fantastic the South Bank show with Bacon. So he's very present, and
So he's sort of mainstream. I've got to admit, I know the name, but I'm pretty ignorant to his work.
He's big, whopping. He's big.
Was he an arrogant man, a pretentious man, a humble
No,
man?
not at all. A difficult man.
Right.
Difficult. A lot of people like him don't, they can be cutting.
He's got no tact.
He's
tactless.
He tells the truth. Let me think. The feeling you get with him is that he's a very controlling character. So when he works and he makes his images, he has he wants to control how you perceive that. So if David Sylvester asked him any personal questions, like the pieces of writing that I've done are for the Francis Bacon estate. Okay, so he's dead.
Right.
Can't answer back, and he can't try and control me, which is great. But when he was alive, there were no-go areas.
Right.
So, and he was extremely famous during his own lifetime. So there were a lot of people wanting to talk to him and write to him. And because he was so powerful, he's a big name.
Yeah.
That gives you power.
Yeah, I'm interested where that power comes from, because he's just doing paintings, isn't he? I say just, but
fame.
It's fame. What kind of sort of power is that? Influence, I guess, isn't it? If he says this guy's a great artist, I love his work. Yeah, you can make or break someone, can't you? You say, I don't like this artist, I think they're full of shit.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was the general consensus that he was extremely interesting and somehow important, even though nobody could put their finger on why he was important.
Is this because he maintained some sort of aloofness?
No, it's literally the quality of the paintings.
Right.
They are extraordinary things.
Can you see the obsession and the ego in like the brush strokes, and how deep does that go with what you gather from that?
Yeah, people are complicated, all right? Bacon was extremely complicated. Right. Probably no more complicated than any of us, but because
to be famous,
it gets forensically analysed, so we're more in touch with it. But although I say he's a controlling character, his poison, the thing that Francis Bacon really gets off on, is giving up control. Okay. So he will begin a painting and tear it up, basically. Begin it again, get so frustrated with it that he'll just slash it with, a big broad brush, or throw paint at it in frustration because he can't make the image. The image that's kind of forming in his brain, that's beginning to make him have the appetite to see it, to create it on canvas, isn't clear enough for him to, and he's technically inept, perhaps. He can't do what somehow this desire to have an image is telling him to do. He's not up to it technically or something. So he'll chuck a load of paint. And so that's giving up control of the way the image starts to chance. Or he was a masochist, so he would go, he would go out to dinner at some West End restaurant, and then he'd end up going down to Earl's Court and get beaten up. That's
right.
he basically
on purpose,
yeah.
Okay,
so he's addicted. I mean, it's kind of obvious. Somebody as controlling as that in public would have a kind of wounded individual that was interested in the opposite,
right?
living inside them, you know.
I saw a documentary about like dominatrixes and stuff. I think it was a Nick, is it Broomfield or Bloomfield? The documentary maker did Kurt and Courtney, Biggie and Tupac. Nick Broomfield, I'm not sure which one it is. One of those.
Okay.
Two. And he did one on a sort of like a dominatrix layer place in sort of New York. It's like a place people went and they had all different kinds of kinky things. And they said the main clientele for them were stock market investors, bankers, CEOs, people who were in charge of an awful lot of people in their everyday lives.
Yeah.
People that had all this responsibility on their shoulders during their everyday lives would then, within their sex lives, relinquish all control to someone else as a form of, I guess it was almost like a purging of this stuff. So are we on the same page there with Bacon? Do you think that was sort of where he was sitting?
Well, he was an obsessive gambler as well. He would go to Monte Carlo. He had a studio. In fact, he moved to Monte Carlo at one point so he could be near the studio. And he would lose all his money. You know, I mean, he lived seriously kind of troughs and peaks kind of existence.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, that's another thing with chance, isn't it? It's relinquishing control. So this is fascinating. I love this sort of stuff. So who else have you written about? Is he the one you love to write about?
Well, he's just the one I've been doing most recently. I wrote a piece last year for them, and then I wrote a piece in lockdown. This is what kept me sane in lockdown, writing about geezers like this. You know? And then that's just come out, and they've asked me to do another one. I think this is the last one. I've reached the end with him, really. I'll be looking for another victim shortly, Andy.
Right. Okay.
Sleep Token. The lyrics.
Yeah. What is it about Sleep Token that you like?
Light and
so
shade.
Much.
Light and shade.
Light and shade. Like the Pixies and Nirvana.
Yeah. Very sweet falsetto voice and really heavy grunge guitar.
Yeah.
And there's something about those opposites. I mean, Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
You know?
It's the juxtapositions, isn't it?
The Mars Volta, my previous obsession.
Yes.
It's all about the light and shade.
It's their drummer, Thomas Bridgen, I think his name is, for the Mars Volta.
Yeah,
Incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely insane. Have you heard of Ghost? Do you like Ghost?
Yes, I have. Just recently.
The metal band with the very delicate vocals.
Yeah, I think Spotify kind of said, if you like this, then you're going to like Ghost. So I have heard of it.
You're going to love Ghost.
Yeah.
You're going to love Ghost. Listen to the album Meliora.
Okay.
And then there's the other one that I really love called Prequel.
Yeah.
And it's a quasi loose concept album on the Black Death.
Okay.
There's a track that opens it up. Well, it's the second track. It's called Rats.
Yeah.
Which obviously is very much about the Black Death, but it's also about his former bandmates who have taken him to court and over like lost royalties or something like that. But he's this, this guy. He dresses as the Pope, Papa Emeritus, or I can't remember how you pronounce it. But every album, he's a different generation of this Pope.
Oh, well, this is
stunning. He's kind of given it up now with this new one. He's a different character now. But the first few albums, he played ancestral frontmen. It was a very strange concept. I think you'd absolutely love it.
You've hit the nail on the head. That sounds exactly my kind of thing. Whether the music's any good or not, the concepts that you've just described are fascinating.
Got it all. I'll hook you up.
Thank you.
I'll hook you up. It'd be fine. So talking of Sleep Token and sleep, it's probably quite a good segue into those two books that you've got there. You have been. How do you record your dreams? You've been recording your dreams for 30 years or something.
35 years, yeah. Well, what's weird is I never made a conscious decision to record my dreams, but here I am 35 years later having recorded them all. And I've never made it into a fetish or, I've never made a big deal about it. I was 35 years ago, I was the kind of guy who wasn't interested in dreams.
Right.
I was too pragmatic, too rational, too intellectual. Thought, dreams were, it's kind of a load of foam bullshit. But I had a dream in 86 that had like a beautiful science fiction short story completeness about it. And it was one of those things where you just couldn't go, but not just write it down on a bit of paper. And that was the beginning of it. And so I just do always write them down now.
And how obsessive are you about writing them down? Do you wake up in the morning and you go, I've got to get this down straight away?
Yeah.
You got a book and a pen near you? Or do you not let it kind of control you too much to that degree and you just think, I'll get it down later? And
no,
because they fade, don't they, once you've woken up? Sometimes they're fresh and then they're gone.
Yeah, it's weird because I wouldn't describe it as in any way, a big thing for me.
Right.
But weirdly enough, I have
Here
done
you are
it.
with a book full of them.
Yeah, it's weird. It's so weird because, I don't make a big song and dance out about it in my own head. Yeah. But one way or another, something drove me to do it without hardly even noticing. Yeah. And, now I've got 1,000 dreams.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think dreams mean? What are they to you? What is a dream?
Oh, Andy, now you're talking. Well, they're different things to different people. I mean, that's the main thing I've learned, that we don't all dream in the same way. Right. And we don't all dream for the same reasons. I don't think, anyway, because people tell me dreams and, I get a sense of where they're coming from. And sometimes it's radically different than where I seem to be coming from in the way that I dream. So, you can't say anything really, you can't have a kind of blanket idea about it. Like, that's one of Freud's, the problems with Freud for me, although I find him very interesting. He did have a kind of generalized view that I suppose it started, this is the way I dream. That's interesting. This must be the way everybody dreams. Right. And only some people dream like Freud, I think. Right. Other people don't. And I think we should always bear that in mind. When you ask what do dreams mean, it means something for me. It might not mean that to the listeners, What
is a typical Freudian dream?
Oh, God. I don't have them.
That's a big question, sorry.
I don't have them, Andy. I do not dream like a Freudian. That's the thing.
I mean, I meant Sigmund Freud's dreams, the dreams that he's written about, that you've obviously read about. Yeah. How do his dreams differ from yours? Because it seems like you're experiencing a very different dream to him.
Well, obviously the thing that if anybody knows anything about, the term Freudian meanings or whatever, the sexual element is there. And as a primary element deep down underneath a lot of the imagery, I've not found that for me. I seem to be more driven by some need to integrate parts of my mind, parts of the mind that are separate from each other. Your unconscious and your conscious areas seem to have a kind of membrane between them that's evolved in the human animal. So we're not very party to the unconscious part of the mind. In fact, I would say Western civilization is more or less in denial,
Right.
even that it's got an unconscious, even though technically and intellectually it's known, we go on behaving as if it doesn't really exist.
Right.
It's not. It's epiphenomenal. It's not really real,
So the theory with dreams that I've heard is that they're an evolutionary tool for simulating situations that would put you in mortal danger, so that if when they occur in real life, you know that it's bad. So for instance, when you're just drifting off to sleep and you get that jolting, that sudden jolt up, that apparently is to simulate that you shouldn't run off the cliff.
Yeah.
Because it'll feel like that, and that's bad. and so and apparently, the people that have survived and then reproduced have been the ones that have had the dreams that have informed them correctly about, tigers are bad. Don't go and try and pull the tail of a tiger.
Well, that might be true for the dream researcher who wrote that theory down.
Right.
But as I said, it's very specific to people, and you shouldn't use that as a blanket kind of hypothesis for everybody else. Well, you can use it as a hypothesis,
right?
But I hope you would find fairly quickly that that's, if it's true for you, it may only be true for you and people like you, and not everybody's alike.
Yes.
So I can buy that. I think that might. It actually sounds like the kind of dream that a scientist. The dream research people that tend to be most published these days are scientific types. So they put people in, MRI scanners, which give a real-time topographical view of which bits of the brain are lit up during any activity, including sleep and dreaming. And they can tell you, which bit of the brain are activated during a dream or whatever. And they tend to come up with theories like that one.
Right. Interesting.
And to me, it's a pretty dumb theory.
Right. So I get two types of dreams, really. Well, three, right? You get your horny dream.
Yeah.
I get the dream where I realize that ghosts actually exist.
Excellent.
And I don't actually freak out about it. Like I'm sort of presented with some sort of poltergeist activity. Right. And I think, God, I knew it. Even though I'm not really big in or invested in anything ghostly. When I was a kid, it was a big thing for me. I really did think it, believed in it, but it was like kid stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe that stayed with me from that developmental age. So that, and then the other one is just ones that are based off of anxieties. Yeah. So there's a lot of showing up to gigs without cymbals. Missing, the band leaving for a show without me, and me being being in the doghouse. Yeah. And that seems to be the main three sort of themes of my dream life.
I think that's a common one. I get those type of things occasionally. Horny ones, obviously, occasionally. The ones I'd be interested in talking about, for your dreams are the ghost dreams.
Right.
So
because the horny ones are they're just primal, aren't they? They're carnal and
they may be of the Bacon type. You want to really enter the being, the nature of your partner in the dream.
To become one. Maybe it was the Spice Girls growing up listening to them.
But so to say what my feeling about my dreams is, which you can use as a hypothesis to measure up to some of yours if you want.
Right.
And you might find you have, a similar feeling or whatever. So in the ghost dream, you see, my experience over all these years has been that pretty much everybody in the dream is me.
Oh, wow.
Including the ghost.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
That is interesting.
And, I'm not going to say this is how it works for everybody, but I definitely know that's the pattern. Over 1,000 dreams. If I use that hypothesis to start to think about the dream, it unlocks itself really quickly. It's a way in. And then you suddenly start to get the meanings of the symbols. They're mainly metaphors, I think, the things that happen in dreams. And you get to understand what metaphor language is. It's because the reason, this is where, you can talk about the Freud thing again, just briefly. Freud kind of believed that the way that the mind works in sleep is that unacceptable content is twisted out of easy to recognize shape. So something you find unacceptable in your behavior or wishes or whatever is then morphed and twisted into something that you don't recognize to keep it safe, I suppose, in your psyche, so you're not grossed out by it, or I don't know whatever. But
so you're sort of sugarcoating it for yourself.
You're symbolizing it in a way that is
digestible.
Or even undigestible, because it's now in a safe shape that you don't really understand.
I see. Right.
Whereas I found through my experience that the dream sender, whatever this mysterious thing is that makes the dream up, and it is truly a mystery that I've never got to the bottom of, but whatever this thing is, it's trying to say it as plainly as it possibly can. So it's not twisted in any way. It's saying it right between the eyes. This is it. This is what I'm saying to you. And the only reason that your conscious mind can't understand it is because the conscious mind works on verbal language. And the language that the dream sender uses is visual language. And visual language can only mean through metaphors. Okay. So, if you say a man is an oak tree, you're an oak tree, Andy. Okay.
I say that's a compliment, thanks.
The oak tree appears in the dream. And if you understand it's a metaphor, you're thinking, what is this oak? Well, it might have an Andy head on it, whatever. Oh, but you know what I mean? So it's a picture language, and it's a metaphor language, and the verbal conscious part of the brain, unless it twigs that, doesn't get it at all. It's in a different language.
It's incredible. I'm still fascinated by the fact that you've said every sort of character in your dream is you. Sort of reminded me of that Aphex Twin music video where they've all got his face.
Yeah.
If you've seen that one.
Yeah.
Is it like that for you?
Yeah. So even the women in my dreams, even the aliens.
Do you make a good woman? Do you look good?
Oh, great. Yeah. She's very insistent. Yeah. It's the animals, the furniture, the carpet, the whole world is clothed in the psyche.
Right.
That's how the dream sender makes.
So it's like the holodeck on in Star Trek.
Exactly.
But it's all exactly. But the AI is all you.
Yeah. So if you've twigged to the metaphor language of this, then you can start to form suspicions.
This is where you get your detective.
Who is this character coming to me in my dreams? What are they saying to me? Should I be listening to it?
Right. Is it usually once you feel that you've got to, because it's obviously going to be very subjective, isn't it?
Yeah.
So once you've got to the bottom of what you believe the message is,
yeah.
Do you just, how am I going to frame this? Do you feel like that's your brain telling you something, or do you feel like the act of coming to that conclusion is your brain telling you something?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think the fact that the patterns are consistent over a long period, I think there's actually something in the unconscious that's structuring it and making these messages to self, which is kind of what I take my dreams as. And again, I'm not going to say this is how it always works for everybody, but it definitely works for me. And it's led to, lots of fantastic moments in the morning when you have a dream. You don't know what the hell it is. It's bizarre. You just think, how the hell can I get into that? And then gradually you find a key to something you think might be a keyhole.
Right.
It might not be a keyhole, but you put this thing in. In fact, you may not even have the key. You might have something you're assuming the key, but you stick it in anyway. And sometimes it twists and then it opens into another door and gradually opens up. And the feeling is immense.
Right.
Because you really can see there's a coherence to it. It relates to dreams that you've had in the past. It relates to your life in general, stuff that you're either aware of or dimly aware of, or hopes that whatever you have. And that is a truly exciting moment. That's probably why I keep writing them down.
Okay. So, do you class nightmares in these dreams, or are they a separate section for you? Or do you not really do nightmares?
I don't really do nightmares. Do I do nightmares? Yeah, I have had the odd nightmare.
Or just something where you wake up and you've kind of unsettled for a while that part of your brain sort of wakes up and sort of creates a rationale for what you've seen, and then you can go back to sleep.
Yeah, I think they're rare. Nightmares are rare for me, but they doesn't mean that they're not subsumed within this general way of thinking about them.
Do you believe that's maybe because you feel more in touch with this subconscious part of you, so it has less? It's almost like it's hemorrhaging negativity, isn't it? Like by your definition of dreams and their purpose within our life, a nightmare would be, I guess, a corrupt file or a hemorrhaging of something, like you said, that would have normally been wrapped up and hidden from you within a metaphor.
I think nightmares, when they occur for me, they are slightly offbeat, actually, because the general beat of the direction of the dreaming over this long period is more constructive. I'm not saying that a nightmare isn't. I couldn't make it constructive by understanding what's going on in it, but on the whole, dreams for me are more constructive in a more benign or less scary way,
Right. And looking back over your book of 1,000 Dreams, do you notice more nightmares towards the beginning, and then they have less and less recurrence throughout the book, or is it all pretty even?
Yeah, there's not many nightmares, Andy. You could class things that I dreamt early on as scary because I didn't understand them.
Right. Okay, so there's another level of subjectivity then, isn't it?
I can see where they were coming from, and it was only scary. Actually, this is a good point, actually. So how you take a dream can depend on how kind of, I don't know, I shy away from using the word, but I'll use it anyway. If you're feeling somehow integrated, now what do I mean by that? I mean that your conscious mind is somehow at ease and possibly permeated by stuff from your unconscious. So that's just not sounding very well, but anyways. The point of saying it is that you can take dreams purely from a kind of ego point of view.
Right.
In which case, some of the dreams are really scary because the ego doesn't want to.
It tries to protect itself.
It's trying to protect itself. Exactly.
So it will lie to you.
It's not so much that it lies to you. It just finds. Well, I can only do it by a theme that occurs in my dreams a lot, and it's of the dissolution of the ego self, probably. So where it kind of merges, we're back to Bacon here, right. Where it kind of merges with another part of the mind.
Right.
There's a lot of dreams about being on the water's edge. So, and this is this kind of line, the permeable membrane between the conscious part and the unconscious part. And if I'm feeling, well, actually, I can't even use the word if I'm feeling, because that implies conscious control. And there isn't conscious control in this kind of thing. So let's put it in another phrase. You can say, if the ego part of me is freaked out about dissolving and becoming porous to that other part of me, then it's scary. And the ego feels it's a scary moment. It doesn't want to be dissolved, doesn't want to be part of greater me, because for me, the ego self, and ego is a funny word because it's got tarred with a lot of brushes that are not really useful, but let's not use the word ego. That's called the conscious bit of me, which sometimes gets called the ego. It's like a bubble in a vast ocean of unconsciousness that is there all the time. I mean, it right now, part of my brain is dreaming. Right now, part of my brain is involved in a lot of unconscious fantasy, but the bit of me that's talking to you is enclosed in a bubble, and the inner surface of that bubble is mirror plated. So I can't see out into the ocean.
Right.
It's mirror plated on one side, like one of those double mirrors that you see in
the interrogation rooms.
Exactly. So some of the unconscious can permeate through it. I don't know where this information is coming from, because the conscious self, on the whole, doesn't want to see itself as a bubble in a wider ocean. It wants to be the whole
thing.
The whole thing. If that situation is somehow
compromised,
well, I go through phases of viscerally. I keep using the word I. Phases occur within me, where the system wants the membrane to be totally porous. Nothing to do with me. It's some inner system that's working within me that is somehow attracted to being merged, those two areas. And then I go through other phases when the system in me is shit scared of that. And so that's the moment when those kind of dreams seem scary. In the other moment, they seem extremely satisfying.
Right. That's crazy. So you've brought some books with you, and I can see there's some bookmarks in there. I am now incredibly curious to hear some extracts from your book. Yeah.
So what I did is I had a retrospective exhibition of my artwork at Southampton City Art Gallery. And it was, a retrospective is like a roundup of what you've done so far. And it came coincidentally at the kind of end of a great phase that had lasted like 30 years in my work. I mean, when you're in a phase, you don't actually know it, but when it comes to a close, you can feel it's kind of mythically complete. It had a beginning, it had a middle, and it had an end. And at the moment when it was coming to an end, by coincidence, this big show was offered to me, and where I could show hundreds of works throughout the museum there. And I thought, what can I publish? What information can I put out that will make it more easy to understand what kind of kick I've been on, because you don't really want to lay it out on a plate for people, because that's kind of dull,
right?
But I thought, what could give people hints? So I collected all the dreams together, because the dreams and the paintings are very similar. I never paint from a dream, because that's dull, because you're
just doubling up.
Yeah, you're repeating something that happened previously.
You've already created it.
Yeah, you're illustrating something that's gone, you know. So what I tend to do is daydream on canvas. So when I'm creating a painting, I will start with nothing, and it'll just, a figure will come in. 10 minutes later, I'll paint it out because another figure wanted to come in that was different than that one. So it's like I've got a cast of characters inside, and the studio is a bit like a seance room. When somebody knocks on the wall, paint me, I paint them, and somebody else knocks on the wall, paint me, I want to fight or fuck with that one.
Yeah.
I paint them,
Yeah.
So it's kind of daydreamed into being. And what I noticed was that the daydream imagery and the night dream imagery shared certain words.
Right.
Certain words in the lexicon were similar or identical. And so publishing the dreams was a way of letting people in to my process or weirdness.
So let's hear some.
Well,
read me a couple.
Well, shall I read you the first dream?
Yeah. Because I'm intrigued by all these bookmarks you've got in here. So I'm figuring that you've been through and you've got some stuff that's.
Well, I've got
greatest hits.
Well, they're not so much the greatest hits; they're the ones that are clean enough to read.
Oh, I was kind of hoping for some non-clean ones. So I'll just read you the one that, because hearing other people's dreams can be very dull. So I'll make this. Right.
It's a short one. Okay, it's the one that I said. Was like a sci-fi
yes
thing. Yeah, okay.
A sci-fi short story.
So it starts where I'm on the upper concourse level of a shopping centre, and I'm leaning on the rail, and I'm looking down, watching all the people walk below on the ground floor of this big shopping centre. But at that moment, from behind me, a woman approaches, and she speaks to me. And she talks about something called the superimposition of souls. Oh. And she asks me if I've been fused. And I don't know what she means. And so she points out that the figures, the people that we can see below, have got more than one soul in their bodies. There seems to have been some kind of social pressure to do it, to become double-souled. Perhaps because of famine or overcrowding. I think these parts of the dream are like your rational mind trying to make sense of it somehow.
Right.
So they're like interpolated into the dream. I think in the dream itself, that's probably not being asked. They're just doing it.
Right.
That's me trying to explain it. Probably early in the morning. So the thing that joins the people, makes the double souls in the bodies, is a machine. So the next minute it cuts to the moment when I'm going to be joined with several people. We go into the machine. For two of the people, it works, and they come out in the same body, a kind of an external amalgam of both. but with two lives inside. And then there are two girls who are joined, and they're not as well joined. They share some parts, but they both have their heads, and they're joined to the first pair. So it's like this kind of big Siamese twin. I know that's not the term that's used anymore, but where people are co-joined twins. Yeah. I'm not joined at all very well, probably just by an arm. And then I find out, and this is where it gets weird into the science fiction. Then I find out that the woman who suggested this and introduced the technology is strange. She's eating people. She's an alien who is sustained by absorbing souls. And by this time, many hundreds of souls could be joined together in one body. And they're still alive, and I don't go into the technical details, but presumably they're their own selves, but they're in one body. And I find out that the woman is from an alien race that came through this galaxy from another galaxy billions of years ago, seeding single-celled life onto planets like a crop, like you would sow seeds in a field. And we're from this planting. They leave the cells for millions of years to undergo evolution and grow souls eventually. And then they return to harvest the crop. And they come to the planet, they influence the crop to fuse so that everybody gets superimposed into one body so that they can eat us easier.
So what does this mean? Is this the capitalist world, Chris, coming down on you?
Ah, boy. Well, weirdly enough, Andy.
Was the rent due when you had that?
Weirdly enough, I was reading a book on dreams by an American psychotherapist called Edward Edinger, Californian, from the 1980s. And there's a dream almost the same as that, dreamt by one of his patients, whatever, in the 1950s. I mean, it was uncanny.
Right.
So, and it has kind of also parallels things in the Bible, It's kind of like the Book of Revelation type apocalypse kind of stuff going on.
Right.
But you say, what does it mean? Well, I think over the years, having realized that everybody in the dream is me, the woman was part of my core self, the one that's kind of hidden from us because we're inside the conscious bubble, the mirror-plated bubble. It's an entity. Let's call it. It is a woman in the dream, but let's call it an entity that took the form of a woman for the sake of the correct metaphor that the dream sender wanted to say, and to make it a woman in terms of traditional kind of symbolism in our culture, it's a more intuitive, more emotional version of the self. And it was basically saying, it's about time you stopped being a bloody intellectual zealot and got in touch with your feelings or something like that,
Big thanks to Chris Bucklow for coming on the show this week. If you want to get a copy of Chris's book, Nantucket Sleigh Ride, we will leave the links in the show note descriptions. You can also check out his other works in there as well. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Follow me, Andy Wrintmore, on Instagram. That's at Andy_S1S. This podcast was produced by Harry Williams. Please join us next week on the Giant Pod.